The scream came up out of the storm, and the Duke of Blackmore was off his horse and running before he had time to think. He had ridden out into the gale against all good sense, because the cliff road was treacherous in such weather, and a carriage had been seen on it, and the cliff road in a storm had taken people from him before. He came around the shoulder of Black Rock with the rain driving sideways into his face and saw it all at once in a flash of lightning. The overturned coach half off the edge, one wheel still spinning against the white sky, the terrified horses screaming in their traces, and a woman in a dark travelling cloak hanging over the lip of the cliff, her gloved fingers locked around a jut of wet stone, the sea boiling 200 feet below her. "Hold on," he roared into the wind, though she could not possibly have heard him, and he threw himself flat upon the streaming grass and reached down over the edge. She was slipping. He could see it. The rock was wet and her grip was failing, and her face, when she turned it up to him, was white as bone. But it was not. He saw with a strange jolt a hysterical face. Her eyes found his and held them. She did not waste her breath on screaming now. She was saving it, conserving everything she had, and that small, impossible composure in a woman about to fall to her death struck him harder than the storm. "Your hand," he shouted. "Give me your hand. I have you." "If I let go I shall fall," she called back, and even now her voice was steady, pitched to carry beneath the gale. "I cannot reach you and hold the rock at once." "Then do not hold the rock. Trust the grip. On 3 you let go and you reach, and I swear before God I will not drop you." He braced his boots against a half-buried stone, locked every muscle of his arm. The rain ran into his eyes. "Look at me. Only at me. 1." Her fingers were white on the rock. 2. He saw her gather herself, saw the decision settle in her face. 3. She let go of the rock and lunged upward, and for one terrible heartbeat she was falling, her cloak streaming out beneath her, and then his hand closed around her wrist like an iron manacle, and the whole weight of her came onto his arm and very nearly tore it from the socket. He bellowed with the effort of it. His boots skidded in the mud. For an instant they both slid toward the edge together, and he thought, with a kind of cold clarity, that the cliff road would have him too, and then his heel caught the buried stone and held, and he hauled, hand over hand, dragging the streaming faith by main force until she came over the lip and collapsed against him, and they both lay tangled in the soaking grass, his arms locked around her, the storm screaming over their heads. She was shaking. So he discovered, was he? "I have you," he said again, more quietly now, though she still could not have heard much over the wind. "I have you. You are safe. You are safe." She lifted her head from his chest. Up close her eyes were grey, the colour of the sea below, and there was rain or there were tears on her face. He could not tell which, and she looked at him as though she could not quite believe he was real. "You came out into this," she said, "onto the cliff road, in a storm, for a carriage that was nothing to you." "No carriage on that road is nothing to me," said the Duke of Blackmore, and did not explain it, and got to his feet and lifted her into his arms before she could protest, because she was soaked through and shaking, and her ankle, he had seen, was turned. "My house is 1/2 a mile. You will not survive the night out here. Hold on to me." She did not argue. She put her arms around his neck, and he carried her out of the storm. Blackmore rose black and vast against the lightning, a great solitary house on the headland, where he had lived alone for years with only his servants and his silences. He carried her across the threshold and into the hall, where his startled housekeeper came running with lamps, and he gave his orders in a voice that brooked no delays. Hot bricks, the fire in the blue room built up high, the physician sent for at first light when the roads allowed. Only when she had been taken away, wrapped in blankets, did he stand dripping in his own hall and realize his hand was still shaking, and that he had not let himself feel anything so violently in a very long time. He learned her name an hour later, when his housekeeper came to say the lady was warm and dry, and asking, with great insistence, to thank him herself. Cordelia Penhallow, a governess, travelling to a new post at a house some 30 miles up the coast, her references in a small wet trunk that one of the grooms had managed to drag back from the wreck. A woman alone in the world then, with no family to send for and nothing waiting for her but employment among strangers. He found as he climbed the stairs to the blue room that he was thinking about how alone she was, and how steadily she had hung over the edge of death and saved her own breath, and how she had looked at him in the grass as though he had hung the moon rather than merely failed to drop her. She was sitting up by the fire, wrapped in one of his late mother's old shawls, her dark hair loose and drying about her shoulders, and when he came in she tried to rise. "You will sit down," said the Duke. "Your ankle is turned. I did not pull you off a cliff to watch you injure yourself on a hearthrug." She sat, but she did not lower her eyes the way servants did before him, the way nearly everyone did. "I owe you my life, Your Grace," she said simply. "I do not know how a person says such a thing. There are no words large enough, but I will not insult you with small ones. Thank you. I shall remember it as long as I live, which, thanks to you, will be a great deal longer than it was meant to be tonight." The Duke of Blackmore stood by the fire and looked at her, and felt the old guarded shell of himself, the thing he had built over years of solitude, develop a crack straight through. "You did not scream," he said, "on the cliff, when most would have. You saved your breath, and you trusted the grip when I told you to let go. Do you know how rare that is? I have seen brave men go to pieces with far less cause." "I have learned," said Cordelia, looking into the fire, "that screaming has very rarely improved any situation I have found myself in, and I have found myself in a number of them. A woman alone learns to be calm, Your Grace, because no one is coming to be calm for her." She glanced up at him. "Though tonight, it seems, someone came after all. I confess it is not an experience I am used to." "No," he said quietly, "nor am I, the coming after." She tilted her head at that, and did not ask, and he found that he wanted, absurdly, to tell her this stranger he had pulled from the sea an hour ago. So he did. "My sister died on that road," he said. "A storm like this one, years ago, a carriage that went over in the dark. I was not there. I had quarrelled with her that morning over nothing, over some trifle I cannot even now remember, and she left in temper, and the cliff road took her, and I was not there to reach down." He stared into the flames. "I ride out whenever a carriage is seen on that road in foul weather. My people think me mad. Perhaps I am. I have spent these years reaching down into a storm for a hand that was already gone." He stopped, surprised at himself. Tonight, for the first time, there was a hand, and I caught it. The silence stretched, full of the storm beyond the walls. "Then I am glad it was mine," said Cordelia softly. "If I had to fall, I am glad I fell where you would be reaching." He looked at her, and something turned over in his chest that he had thought long dead. The storm did not break for 3 days, and the roads to the coast were washed out, and so Cordelia Penhallow remained at Blackmore while her ankle healed, and the physician could not come and the sea hammered the headland. The Duke told himself it could not be helped. He told himself a great many things. None of them explained why he found himself, on the second day, sitting with her in the long gallery while the rain ran down the tall windows, or why on the third he had the cook prepare the dishes he had overheard her say she liked, or why the great cold house that had been a tomb to him for years had begun, somehow, to feel less like one. She was not idle, she would not be. She mended what wanted mending, and she read to him in the evenings in her steady carrying voice, and she argued with him, gently, but without an ounce of fear, about everything from the management of his tenants to the foolishness of a grown man riding out into storms to torment himself. She did not flatter him. She did not fear him. She treated him, he realized one evening, with something like wonder, simply as a man she happened to be grateful to and to like, and not as the Duke of Blackmore at all, with all the cold weight that name carried. On the third night the storm finally began to die, and he found her standing at the gallery window watching it go, and he knew the roads would be passable by morning, and that she would leave for her post among strangers, and that he could not bear it. "Miss Penhallow," he said. She turned. "The roads will be open tomorrow," he said. "You will be able to go on to your post." "I know," she said. Something in her face had gone carefully still. "I have been a great imposition. You have been more than kind, and I shall not trespass on it a moment longer than I must." "You have not been an imposition." He crossed the gallery to her, his boots loud in the quiet. "Cordelia, I am not a man of pretty speeches. I have lived alone too long and said too little to too few, and I do not know how to do this gracefully, so I will do it plainly, which is the only way I know." He stopped before her. "3 days ago I reached down into a storm, as I have 100 times, expecting nothing. And I caught a living hand, and in 3 days that hand has done what I did not think anything in this world could do again. It has brought me back to life. I do not want you to go to that house among strangers. I want you to stay with me, not as a governess, as my wife." Her grey eyes went wide. For a moment she did not breathe. "Your Grace," she whispered, "you cannot mean it. I am a governess. I have no family, no fortune, no name. You are the Duke of Blackmore. The world would—" "The world," said the Duke, "may go over the cliff for all I care. The world was not there on that road. You were. I have spent years among people who feared my name and wanted my money and saw nothing of the man at all. And in 3 days a penniless governess with a turned ankle has seen straight through to him and treated him as no one has in longer than I can remember. I do not care what you have. I care what you are." He reached out slowly and took her hand, the same hand he had caught above the sea, and held it as though were the most precious thing in the house, which to him it now was. "I have been reaching down into the dark for years, Cordelia. You are the first thing I have ever pulled back up. Stay. Let me spend my life holding on to the hand I caught." The tears came then, sliding down her face, but she was smiling through them, and she did not pull her hand away. "I was so calm on that cliff," she said, half laughing, half weeping. "I told you. A woman alone learns to be calm because no one is coming, and then someone came. And now you stand here telling me that someone wishes to come for the rest of my life." She closed her fingers around his. "I have spent so long being brave because I had to be. I think I should like very much to be brave because I want to be with you. Yes, Tristan, yes, I will stay." He drew her into his arms, gently mindful of her ankle, and held her against him while the last of the storm muttered and died out over the sea. And for the first time in all his solitary years the great cold house of Blackmore felt warm. They were married before the summer, in the small chapel on the headland, with the sea calm and blue below, and the cliff road dry and harmless in the sun. The county, which had long regarded the brooding Duke of Blackmore as a man wedded only to his grief, could not account for it, that he should marry a governess of no family at all, a woman pulled half-drowned from a carriage wreck on the cliff road. But those who saw them together did not wonder long, for there was no mistaking the way the Duke watched his wife, as a man watches something he has nearly lost and means never to lose again. On the evening of their wedding he found her on the headland above the chapel, looking down at the place where the road ran along the cliff, the very place he had reached down for her in the storm. He came and stood behind her and put his arms around her, and she leaned back against him, and for a while they simply watched the sea. "I used to hate this road," he said at last, his chin resting against her hair. "For years I could not look at it. It took my sister, and it took my peace, and I rode it only to punish myself." "And now?" she asked softly. "And now," said the Duke of Blackmore, "it is the dearest stretch of ground I own, because it is where I caught your hand. Everything I have, everything I am, came up out of the sea on that road in a storm, and I would ride out into 1,000 more if it meant catching you again. He turned her gently in his arms so that he could see her face in the last gold light. I spent so long reaching into the dark, Cordelia. I had forgotten there could be anything at the other end but loss. You taught me otherwise. You let go of the rock and you trusted me, and I have not stopped giving thanks for it since. You told me to look only at you, she said, smiling, her hand rising to his weathered cheek. On the cliff, you said, look at me, only at me. I did. I have not looked away since, said Cordelia, and I do not intend to. And the Duke of Blackmore, who had lived alone with the storms and the grief for so many long years, gathered his wife against him on the high green headland above the sea, and knew himself at last to be a man who had reached down into the dark and pulled love itself up into the light, and meant to hold it with both hands for the whole of the life he had been given back.